Today, I want to speak for just a little while on the theme, beloved community in a fractured world. Beloved community in a fractured world. We gather today to honor the life and legacy, and most importantly, the witness of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But we are not here to just simply remember a dream. We are here to remember a disciple of hope who placed the demand on our very lives. When Toni Morrison was asked by Martin Luther King III, "If you could speak with my father, what would you ask him?" She paused, and then she said, "I hope he is not disappointed." Do you think he's disappointed? There must be something here to please him. Morrison later reflected, confessing that she was haunted by the possibility of disappointment. Not disappointment born of failure, but disappointment born of comfort with the status quo. She continued, "I realized later that I was responding to something other and more durable than the complex personhood of King. Not to the preacher he was, or to the scholar he was, or to the vulnerable human being he was, not to the political strategist, the orator, the brilliant risk-taking activist, but I was responding to his mission. His, as he coined it, audacious faith. His expectation of transforming and appending our world into a cosmic elegy, into a broad psalm of brotherhood." Morrison never met King. Yet, she felt a claim placed on her life because of him. Not because of his charisma, not because of his eloquence, but because of his mission that he embodied unto death. And that is the question before us today. In our fractured world, what does fidelity to King's mission require of us now? What does fidelity to King's mission require of us now? Our scriptural focus comes from the opening of Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. A church, a community fractured by status, fractured by ego, by allegiance, and by fear. It was a community fractured by competing claims to status, particularly seeking the claims of status of the dominant standards of society that oppose the standards that called the community into being. And yet Paul begins with a word that feels almost defiant in such a moment. "I give thanks to my God always for you, because you have been enriched in him in speech and knowledge of every kind. God is faithful. By him you were called into fellowship of his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord." Before Paul addresses the division, he names the identity. He calls the community back to themselves. Before he confronts conflict, he reminds the community of the faithful of their calling, of their mission, of who they are and whose they are. They're not called into polite coexistence. They're not called into mere association. They're not called into a battle for the status according to dominant society. But they're called into koinonia, a shared life grounded in an audacious faith in the one who has called them into fellowship. Such an audacious faith moves to powering a reimagining of community itself, of refounding the community, of regrounding the community in the mission that will maintain it regardless of all the circumstances. King gave such a reimagined community a name: beloved community. You see, beloved community is not sentimentality. It is not peace without conflict. It is a most radical moral and political vision grounded in the conviction that every human being bears irreducible dignity. It reminds us that all social systems, all political systems, all ecclesial systems, and yes, all educational systems must be transformed to reflect that foundational truth: the inherent worth, value, and dignity of every human being. It is this conception of beloved community that challenges what I call prefix justice. Let me say that again. Wait there. Beloved community challenges what I call prefix justice. You see, prefix justice are those phrases which signify a surface commitment: racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice. You see, these phrases signify a surface commitment to justice that's qualified to a particular container, a particular idea, while leaving the very underlying conditions of justice undisturbed, untouched, unchanged, and untransformed. You see, it becomes easy. We can say racial justice by putting someone of color around the table, but the power arrangements around the table remains unchanged. We can talk about economic justice when we say, well, we just want to have some access and opportunity, but we still have deep inequality. And it's not just within an institution, it's within our society and within our world. Beloved community insists on justice that transforms how we live, how we think, how we act, and most importantly, how we care for one another and care for all of God's creation. You see, prefix justice was not about beloved community. And it's not by accident that this MLK Day, we in the Triad welcome the Buddhist monks who were marching for peace. Because I'm reminded of a letter that was sent to Martin Luther King Jr. A letter dated June 12th, 1963. A letter from Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist and peace activist, writing to King in 1963, seeking King's support because the Black freedom struggle was seen as an international freedom struggle. It was one thing that King would speak to the community in Atlanta and at Dexter, he would remind them that the Black freedom struggle was about 800 million people around the world struggling for freedom. You see, it wasn't just the civil rights movement. It wasn't just about the United States. It was about the world, and the world understood. So Nhat Hanh wrote a letter to King. And in that letter, he reminded King that you cannot be silent about the very violence going on in Vietnam. The violence first of the French colonizers after the First World War that continued their colonial wars in Vietnam, only to be surpassed by the Americans, only to be surpassed by us. Nhat Hanh said, you cannot be silent since you have already been in action, and you are in action because God is in you and is in your action as well. Nhat Hanh recognized that the power and strength of beloved community was one that could repel those who seek to deny beloved community in the world. Nat Han's example was so exemplary. In 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. would nominate him for the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize. He didn't go and give his Peace Prize to Nat Han. He recognized his unique mission, his unique voice, his unique presence in the world, and said, "You deserve this prize." Nat Han would end his letter writing, "I profess my faith in love and communion and in the world's humanists, whose thoughts and attitudes should be a guide for all humankind, and finding who is the real enemy of humanity." When Martin Luther King was assassinated, Nat Han was in New York City. He was so distraught, he did not eat. And he took a vow. And his vow was, "I will commit the rest of my life to building beloved community." A Baptist, a Buddhist, and beloved community. You see, this episode between Nat Han and King and that fidelity to that vision of beloved community reminds us that all too often we want community that is uniform and that underwrites our unity. You got to believe like we believe. You got to feel like we feel. But they remind us that unity without justice is an illusion. Unity without diversity is domination. Unity without courage is performance. Beloved community, then, is not a unitary ideal. It is the very shape of an audacious faith. And I remember the letter from Nat Han, and I remember another letter of 1963. A letter written by a prison intellectual from a jail cell in Birmingham. And from that jail cell, King offered us one of the most devastating theological critiques of the church, the community of the faithful, and of American society. And let us be clear, he was not writing only about politicians. That would be too easy. He was writing to those faith leaders who chose to follow the path of politicians in their congregations and in their very lives. Faith leaders who urged patience, faith leaders who prized order over righteousness, faith leaders who feared disruption more than injustice. They canceled moderation. They warned against extremism. Their concern was not just racist violence, but order. And of course, in that letter, King would write with a devastating clarity. A clarity that speaks to a particular situation in 1963, but dare I say, if we take a bit of imagination, it may speak to us in this moment. King writes, "I must make two honest confessions to you. My Christian and Jewish brothers, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. Who constantly says, I agree with your goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods. who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. What King exposed was not simply a political failure, it was a theological failure. The faithful had confused peace with quiet, order with righteousness, time with salvation. King insisted that the community of the faithful cannot outsource justice to a policy or performance. It cannot be outsourced to privilege or proclamation. It cannot be outsourced to pure politics. He rejected the myth of time and time alone that will heal all wounds. He declared instead that time is not a neutral marker of events. Rather, it is a marker of moments when people seek to engage in actions either destructively or redemptively. From that jail cell, King placed the community of the faithful under judgment. He named a faith that blesses the status quo while claiming neutrality as a faith that has lost its moral nerve. King did not abandon the church. He called the church back to itself. He reminded the church that the early Christians were not praised for their caution, but for their conviction. They were disturbers of the peace, accused of turning the world upside down, not because they loved chaos, but because they served a loving, liberating, and life-affirming God. And it is a courage that was forged not in moderation, but in faithful confrontation with injustice wherever it finds itself. And that claim is placed upon us today because it is not a distant memory. It is one that happened in this place. You see, a year earlier, King visited Wake Forest College. On October 11th, he stood in Wake Chapel. He was a guest of students and a guest of the faculty. In a moment when the university, just in April of 1962, decided to repeal its policy of racial segregation. It had not yet decided to live into its motto, Pro Humanitate. And it has not decided to live into that motto to this day. Yet King's presence here was not ceremonial. It was consequential. He came here less than 2 weeks after being assaulted by a self-styled Nazi at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference meeting in Arlington, Virginia. Less than 2 weeks. Still, he came here. Why would he come here after being assaulted? We don't tell this part of the story. He came here because he understood that the message here will reach shapers of a society and shapers of a moral imagination. And King's visit here is not something that we just celebrate on Martin Luther King Day. At Wake Divinity, it must be a claim on our community. A claim not simply to welcome diversity, but to embody justice in everything that we do. Not simply to open doors, but to transform structures, even structures within our institution. And standing on this campus, King reminded Wake Forest then and now that beloved community is not formed by policy alone, but by courage, not sustained by good intentions, but by faithful action. not by speaking softly to the aggrieved, but by standing publicly in solidarity. Not by performing politics, but by doing the hard work of undoing domination masked as truth and rendering justice that has been and continues to be denied. For us at Wake Forest University School of Divinity, this means theological education is never neutral. Our classrooms are not refuges from the world's pain. They are training grounds for moral courage. Formation is not about competence. It is about conscience. The question is not only what do you believe, but what are you willing to risk for your belief? In a world marked by violence, marked by democratic fragility, marked by inequality, marked by all types of nationalisms, marked by an ecological crisis that holds creation in the balance, beloved community, my brothers and sisters, and all of my siblings, is not an abstraction. It is our very vocation. Paul reminds us of a promise. He will also strengthen you to the end. God is faithful. God is faithful. That is not a mere promise. It is a responsibility. And thus, if we believe that God is faithful, then we understand that despair does not have the last word, that authoritarianism is not ultimate, then beloved community is not some deferred dream. It is a promise that we are committed to struggling, to give birth to allow to grow, and to live, not only in our moment, but for the unborn who will come after us. You see, Wake Forest University School of Divinity, you and I are not here for safe and comfortable ministries. We are not here to be formed to conform to this world. We are being formed with an audacious faith to speak when silence is rewarded, an audacious faith to stand when standing up costs us something. An audacious faith that remembers that the cross is not ornamental, it is an obligation. Thus, in this moment, the question comes to us. The question from history and from generations unborn. They will ask, where is the community of the faithful in this moment of fracture, this moment of crisis? And I'm here to respond on behalf of all of us. May it be said that in this moment, in this place, in this school of divinity, that we are a people that's formed with an audacious faith. Such an audacious faith for this fractured world. An audacious faith that believes that justice is our calling. An audacious faith that understands that reconciliation is our calling. And that compassion is the ethic that enables us to be pilgrims of the journey, to be disciples of hope, to leave programs and to become those individuals who will be and become beloved community. This is our calling, Wake Forest University School of Divinity. On this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, let us remind ourselves and be called back to who we are as a beloved community in this world. And let our thoughts, our actions, our way of life be transformed, because this is who we are, and God is faithful. Amen. Amen.